I could barely stand during my first week as an Amish wife. Everyone told me to stay silent. My mother did not look at me when I asked whether a bride was supposed to feel that weak. It was the 5th morning of my marriage. I was 18 years old, standing inside my husband's washroom with one hand pressed against the wall and the other gripping the edge of a wooden basin. My knees trembled beneath my dress. The air smelled of wet soap, lamp smoke, and something bitter that had been mixed into my breakfast tea. My mother stood less than 3 feet away. She kept folding a towel that was already folded. When I whispered that I could barely stand, she told me every new wife needed time to adjust. Then she leaned close enough for me to feel her breath against my cheek. "Whatever happens in this house," she said, "you must not speak of it." At the time, I believed she was protecting my marriage. I did not yet understand why my husband watched me drink every cup he brought me, why my mother-in-law kept a record of when I slept, or why my own mother had arrived before sunrise without being invited. Most of all, I did not understand why 4 people seemed more frightened of my questions than they were of the fact that I could no longer stand without help. My name is Sarah. I am 71 years old now, a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 11. I left the district where I was raised many years ago, though parts of it have never entirely left me. Even now, when I smell dried valerian or burnt chicory, I remember that first week as an Amish wife. For most of my life, I told myself I had simply become sick from exhaustion. That was the explanation everyone gave me. It was not the truth. I married Daniel Miller in the spring of 1973. Our district was small, even by the standards of the communities surrounding us. Families lived along 2 dirt roads separated by fields, pasture fences, and patches of woodland. News did not need to be announced. It moved from kitchen to kitchen before the person involved had decided what it meant. Daniel was 24, broad-shouldered and quiet. He was known as a dependable worker. He repaired harnesses, helped his father with carpentry, and rarely spoke during gatherings unless someone asked him a direct question. That silence was one of the reasons my father trusted him. A quiet man, my father often said, had learned to control himself. I mistook silence for gentleness because I had been taught that loudness was the only form danger took. During our courtship, Daniel was courteous. He brought my mother a sack of apples one autumn and fixed a broken latch on our chicken shed without being asked. When we sat together after Sunday gatherings, he listened more than he spoke. I believed this meant he valued my thoughts. Only later did I understand that Daniel listened carefully because he wanted to know which thoughts would need correcting. My mother, Ruth, seemed relieved when he asked to marry me. She had spent years worrying that I was too curious. I read every printed thing that entered our home, including seed packets, old almanacs, medicine labels, and the scraps of newspaper used to wrap purchases. I asked why one family followed a rule another family did not. I wanted to know why men discussed church matters behind closed doors while women prepared the meal afterward. My questions embarrassed her. "People will think you are dissatisfied," she once warned me. I told her wanting to understand was not the same as being ungrateful. She looked at me with an expression I could not read then. Now I recognize it as fear. Daniel's mother, Miriam, was different from my mother. Ruth avoided conflict by softening every sentence. Miriam did not soften anything. On the morning after our wedding, she entered our kitchen without knocking. She carried a covered basket and placed it beside the stove. "You will need a proper schedule," she said. I had been married for less than 24 hours. She opened the basket and removed dried leaves, jars of powder, 2 folded cloths, a bottle without a label, and a narrow black notebook tied with string. Daniel sat at the table eating bread. He did not seem surprised. Miriam explained that the first week of marriage could be difficult for a young woman. A bride might become emotional, disobedient, homesick, or physically unsettled. Her body, she said, had to learn the rhythm of her new household. I remember looking toward Daniel, expecting him to smile at the strangeness of those words. He continued eating. Miriam prepared a dark tea and placed it before me. It smelled earthy and bitter. "What is in it?" I asked. Her fingers paused around the handle of the cup. "Things women have used for generations." "That does not tell me what they are." Daniel lifted his eyes. It was not anger I saw in his face. It was warning. Miriam said the tea would settle my nerves and help me sleep. Then she opened the black notebook and wrote down the time. That was the first moment I felt something was wrong. It was small enough to dismiss a cup of tea, a mother-in-law giving advice, a husband wanting peace between two women. I drank it. Within an hour, my arms felt heavy. By midday, I had difficulty concentrating. I burned the bottom of a pan because I stood beside the stove and forgot what I had been doing. Daniel found me staring at the blackened cornmeal. He took the pan from my hands. "You need rest," he said. His voice was tender. I felt ashamed of my suspicion. He helped me to the bedroom and covered me with a quilt. Before leaving, he placed the cup from breakfast on the table beside the bed. "Finish that first." I slept until evening. When I woke, Miriam was seated in the corner. The black notebook rested in her lap. She asked whether I had dreamed, whether my heart was beating quickly, whether I felt restless, and whether I had experienced any desire to leave the house. I said I wanted to visit my mother. Miriam wrote something down. Then she told me visits during the first week were unwise. A new wife must attach herself to her new home, she said. The next morning, Daniel brought another cup. I told him I did not want it. He sat beside me and touched my hand. "My mother has helped many women." "Which women?" He looked toward the closed bedroom door. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." That sentence became familiar during my marriage. It made every objection sound like unnecessary trouble I had created myself. I drank half the tea and poured the rest through a crack beside the window after he left. By breakfast, Miriam had returned. She lifted the empty cup, inspected its bottom, and looked toward the damp ground below the window. Neither of us spoke. She prepared another. This time, she remained in the room while I drank it. By the third day, my legs had begun to tremble. I could still walk, but each step felt uncertain, as though the floor shifted slightly beneath me. My mouth remained dry, no matter how much water I drank. Sounds seemed farther away than they were. Daniel told me I had worked too hard preparing for the wedding. Miriam said I was resisting rest. When I asked to see the district's midwife, they exchanged a glance. I noticed it because it was the first time they looked less like mother and son than two people guarding the same door. "There is no need to involve anyone," Daniel said. That afternoon, my younger sister Leah came to deliver a crock my mother had left at the wedding supper. Leah was 16 and had always been the boldest person in our family. She could imitate the bishop's solemn voice so perfectly that I once laughed during prayer and had to leave the room. When she saw me sitting beside the stove, her smile disappeared. "What happened to you?" I told her I was tired. She crouched beside my chair and pressed the back of her hand against my forehead. "You look as though you have been awake for a week." Miriam entered before I could answer. She told Leah that married matters were not for unmarried girls. Leah stood. "My sister's not a married matter." For one hopeful second, I believed she would refuse to leave. Then Daniel came through the doorway. He did not raise his voice. He only told Leah our household needed privacy. She looked from him to Miriam and then back to me. I expected her to challenge them. Instead, she lowered her eyes. She left without the crock. I heard her crying outside before the door closed. That was the first betrayal, or what I believed was the first betrayal. I felt abandoned by the person who had always defended me. Years later, I learned Leah went directly home and begged our parents to intervene. My father told her she had no right to interfere between husband and wife. My mother told her she could make things worse for me by spreading questions. Leah did not leave because she stopped caring. She left because she was 16, frightened, and had been ordered to remain silent by every adult whose authority shaped her life. But during that first week, I did not know any of that. I only knew she had walked away. On the fourth morning, I woke on the floor. The last thing I remembered was standing beside the bed while fastening my dress. When I opened my eyes, my cheek was pressed against the wooden boards. One shoe was still in my hand. Daniel stood above me. He seemed irritated rather than alarmed. "You must stop fighting the medicine." I stared at him. Until then, no one had called the tea medicine. "What is it treating?" He bent and took the shoe from my hand. "Your nervous condition." I had never been told I had a nervous condition. I asked who had decided that. He said his mother understood such things. I told him I wanted the midwife. He refused. I told him I wanted my mother. He hesitated. That hesitation gave me hope. I believed my mother would come, see me, and take me home. Daniel left shortly after breakfast. Miriam remained behind and guided me into a chair near the kitchen table. She prepared another cup, but I kept my lips closed when she held it toward me. Her expression did not change. "You do not want Daniel to think he chose badly." "I am sick. You are unsettled." I fell. "You fainted because you are exhausting yourself with resistance." I asked what she was writing in the notebook. She closed it, the string wrapped around it twice. "That is a record for your own protection." "Protection from what?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "From the things you may claim later." Those words frightened me more than the weakness in my legs. Before I could question her, a buggy stopped outside. My mother entered carrying bread in a clean apron. Relief moved through me so quickly that I began to cry. My mother rarely showed affection openly, but she crossed the room and placed both hands around my face. For a moment, I was a child again. Then Miriam handed her the black notebook. My mother read 2 pages. The warmth disappeared from her expression. She asked to speak with me alone. That was how we came to stand in the washroom on the 5th morning of my marriage, with my hand against the wall and my knees threatening to fold. I told her about the tea, the fainting, and the notebook. I told her Daniel would not let me seek help. I expected horror. Instead, she folded the towel. "Daniel's family has concerns," she said. "What concerns?" She would not answer. I asked whether she knew what was in the tea. Her hand stopped. That was when I understood she knew more than she wanted to say. I gripped her sleeve. "Take me home." She pulled away as though my touch had burned her. "You are married now." "I cannot stand." "You are standing." "Only because I am holding the wall." Her mouth tightened. Then she spoke the words I carried for decades. "Whatever happens in this house, you must not speak of it." She told me silence could preserve a marriage while foolish accusations could destroy one. She said Daniel was respected, Miriam was experienced, and I had always possessed an overactive mind. An overactive mind? That was the name they gave to every truth I noticed before they were ready to admit it. My mother left less than 20 minutes later. She did not take me with her. After she departed, Miriam brought me another cup. This time, I drank it without resisting, not because I trusted them, because my mother had seen me and chosen their explanation. For the next 2 days, I moved through the house like a person underwater. I remember fragments, a spoon dropping from my hand, Daniel guiding me away from a window, Miriam asking whether I still wanted to return home, the black notebook opening, a lamp burning during daylight, my own voice answering questions I could not later remember. Each time I became more alert, someone gave me another drink. They began mixing it with broth when I refused tea. On the sixth night, I heard Daniel and Miriam arguing downstairs. Their voices were low, but the house was quiet. Daniel said, "She is weaker than the others." Miriam answered, "Because she keeps resisting." He said they should stop. For the first time, I believed Daniel might be protecting me. I eased myself from the bed and crawled toward the doorway because my legs would not support me. From the top of the stairs, I saw him place the black notebook on the table. He told Miriam he had not expected the process to continue so long. She said 1 week was not long compared with a lifetime of trouble. Then she said my name. Sarah must learn now, before she has children, that thoughts become dangerous when they are spoken. I covered my mouth with both hands. The tea was not being given because I was ill. It was being given because they believed I might become difficult. Daniel had told his mother about my questions during courtship. He had described my interest in reading, my objections to certain rules, and my habit of challenging explanations that did not make sense. They had not discovered a nervous condition after the wedding. They had decided before the wedding that I possessed one. The first week had been planned. I shifted my weight, and the floorboard beneath me creaked. Daniel looked up. Our eyes met. For several seconds, no one moved. Then he came upstairs. He lifted me from the floor and carried me back to bed. I asked whether he had known. He sat beside me without answering. That silence answered enough. I asked what his mother meant by the others. His face changed. Not guilt. Fear. He told me to sleep. I grabbed his wrist. Were there other women? He pulled away. Then he said something that restored my hope, though only temporarily. "Tomorrow I will take you to your mother." I believed him. I thanked him. That is difficult for me to admit. After 6 days of being weakened, watched, and denied help, I thanked the man who promised to return me to the home from which he had taken me. He told his mother the treatment would end. For the first time that week, no tea was brought before bed. By morning, my thoughts were clearer, though my body remained weak. Daniel helped me dress. He packed 2 dresses into a cloth bag and placed the black notebook beneath them. I noticed but said nothing. I thought he was bringing proof to my parents. Miriam stood beside the buggy with her arms folded. She told Daniel he was making a mistake. He answered, "It has gone far enough." At that moment, I saw him as my rescuer. That was the second reversal in my understanding of him. I believed he had been pressured by his mother. I believed he had finally recognized the danger. I imagined returning home, recovering, and perhaps beginning our marriage again with clearer boundaries. The buggy did not turn toward my parents' farm. Daniel took the south road toward the bishop's house. When I realized where we were going, I asked him to stop. He told me the matter had to be settled properly. What matter? Your accusations. I had not accused anyone publicly. I had barely spoken to anyone at all. He explained that if I went home in my condition, people would ask questions. Before that happened, the bishop needed to hear that I had become confused from wedding strain and had imagined harmful intentions where none existed. The black notebook was not proof for me. It was a record against me. Miriam had written down every time I resisted, every time I asked to leave, every question about the tea, and every moment she considered emotional or unstable. My responses to being drugged had been recorded as evidence that I required the drugs. I told Daniel to take me home. He kept driving. I considered jumping from the buggy, but my legs could barely support my weight. Even if I reached the road, I could not outrun the horse. The bishop's wife, Anna, opened the door when we arrived. She was a thin woman in her 50s with tired eyes and flour on her sleeves. She looked at me once and then looked sharply at Daniel. "What has she been given?" Daniel said I was exhausted. Anna repeated her question. He did not answer. She guided me into the front room. and made me sit near the window. Then she sent her youngest son to fetch my parents. Daniel protested. Anna told him he could either wait quietly or explain why his wife could not walk 1 week after the wedding. For the first time, an adult spoke as though my condition mattered more than my obedience. I began to believe Anna would help me. The bishop entered carrying the black notebook Daniel had brought inside. He read several pages. Then he asked Daniel whether the mixtures had been approved. Daniel said his mother had used them before. The bishop's jaw tightened. He dismissed Daniel from the room. That frightened Daniel more than any accusation I had made. When we were alone, the bishop asked me what I remembered. I told him everything. He listened without interruption. Then he asked whether Miriam had used the unlabeled bottle. I said yes. Anna sat down beside me. The two of them exchanged a look. There had been other women. Not many, as I later learned, but enough that questions had already begun. Miriam had developed what she called a settling treatment for brides she considered emotionally rebellious. Most received only mild herbs meant to encourage sleep. But years earlier, one young woman had become seriously ill after being given too much of a stronger preparation. The family had moved away soon afterward. No church record described what happened. No public warning was given. Miriam had been privately told to stop. Daniel knew that. My mother knew it too. That was the midpoint of my life, though I did not recognize it then. Everything before that moment rested on one belief. My mother had abandoned me because she trusted Daniel's family more than she trusted me. The truth was worse. She had not been ignorant. She had been afraid of an old scandal returning. My parents arrived before noon. Leah came with them despite being ordered to stay home. When she saw me, she rushed forward, but my father held out his arm and stopped her. The bishop placed the black notebook on the table and asked my mother whether she had known Miriam had been forbidden to continue her treatments. My mother said nothing. My father answered for her. He said old misunderstandings should not be used to damage respectable families. The bishop asked again. My mother finally said yes. The room became very quiet. I looked at her hands. She was twisting the edge of her apron exactly as she had twisted the towel in the washroom. Why did you leave me there? Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She said that before my wedding, Miriam had approached her with concerns about my independence. Daniel wanted reassurance that I would not disgrace him by challenging household decisions. My mother told Miriam I had always been strong-minded but could be guided. Guided. That was the word they used. My mother had agreed that Miriam could help me adjust during the first week, provided nothing dangerous was used. When she visited and saw how weak I had become, she realized Miriam had broken that promise. But admitting it would mean admitting her own part in the agreement. She chose silence because she believed the treatment would stop once I submitted. She thought protecting my reputation as a wife was more important than protecting my body from the people defining obedience for me. I thought you would recover, she whispered. I asked, what if I had not? She looked down. That was the deepest betrayal. Not that my mother wanted to hurt me. She did not. She loved me. But her fear of public shame was stronger than her willingness to stand beside me when I needed her. For many years, I believed love and betrayal could not exist in the same person. Age taught me otherwise. Some of the deepest injuries are committed by people who love us but are too frightened to act like it. The bishop said the matter would be addressed privately. That word, privately, changed the room. Daniel relaxed slightly. My father nodded. Even my mother seemed to breathe again. They began discussing recovery, apologies, and how to prevent gossip. No one asked what I wanted. The bishop proposed that I remain with Anna for several days, then return to Daniel once Miriam promised not to interfere. Daniel said he had made a mistake, but had only wanted a peaceful household. My father told me marriage required forgiveness. My mother said returning quickly would prevent people from imagining something worse than what had happened. Leah stood beside the wall, staring at me. She was the only person who did not tell me what to do. Anna brought water and placed it in my hands. The glass shook against my teeth. That small sound made everyone stop talking. I looked around the room at the people, deciding how my life would continue. My husband had helped weaken me. My mother-in-law had recorded my confusion as evidence against me. My parents had known enough to intervene and had chosen reputation. The bishop had known of an earlier incident and had kept it private. Even Anna, who showed me kindness, lived inside a system where the first instinct was still to contain the truth. I realized that if I returned, the tea might stop. But the agreement beneath it would remain. They would still believe my questions were symptoms. They would still believe silence was proof of goodness. They would still believe a wife belonged to the marriage before she belonged to herself. I put the glass down. I will not return to Daniel. My father said I was confused. Daniel said I was proving his concerns. The bishop warned me that leaving after 1 week would create consequences I did not understand. I told him I understood enough. Then my legs failed. I slid from the chair onto my knees. Everyone moved toward me at once. I held up one hand. No. The room stopped. I used the chair to pull myself upright. My arms shook. My vision narrowed. Every part of me wanted to sit down and let someone else decide. But I remained standing. Barely. That was the complete truth of my first week as an Amish wife. I could barely stand because Miriam had been giving me a concentrated sedating mixture from the unlabeled bottle, increasing it whenever I resisted. Daniel knew the purpose of the treatment and allowed it because he wanted a wife who would stop questioning him. My mother knew Miriam had used such methods before and remained silent because exposing the arrangement would reveal that she had consented to my guidance. The bishop had protected the family from an earlier scandal, and Tal wanted to handle my case quietly for the same reason. They were not all protecting the same secret. Daniel protected his authority. Miriam protected her belief that she could correct women. My mother protected herself from shame. My father protected the family's standing. The bishop protected the district's reputation. Each person called it peace. I was the only person paying for it with my body. Leah came to my side. She placed my arm around her shoulders. No one stopped us when she helped me outside, perhaps because no one believed I could go far. Anna arranged for me to stay with a widowed cousin beyond our district. A doctor in the nearest town examined me 2 days later. He could not identify every substance I had been given, but he said the weakness, confusion, fainting, and dry mouth were consistent with heavy doses of sedating herbs combined with another preparation that should never have been administered without proper knowledge. It took nearly 3 weeks before I could walk normally. Daniel visited once. He apologized for allowing his mother to go too far. He did not apologize for believing I needed to be corrected. He asked me to come home. I said no. Our separation became permanent. The district did not describe it that way. Some said I had suffered a nervous collapse. Others said modern doctors had turned my mind against my husband. A few claimed I had always been too proud for marriage. No one publicly mentioned the black notebook. The bishop kept it. Years later, after his death, Anna returned it to me. Several pages had been removed. The remaining entries were written in Miriam's precise hand. Sarah questioned the morning preparation. Sarah requested her mother. Sarah attempted to avoid rest. Sarah listened outside the bedroom. Sarah continues to insist her thoughts are clear. That final sentence remained with me. She had written it as evidence of illness. I read it as proof that some part of me had survived. My relationship with my mother never fully healed. For several years, We spoke only at family funerals and necessary gatherings. Eventually, she visited me after the birth of my first daughter. She held the baby for a long time. Then she said, "I believed silence would keep you safe." I answered, "It kept everyone safe except me." She did not ask for forgiveness that day. I respected her more for that than I would have respected another excuse. Near the end of her life, she admitted that she had recognized the smell of the unlabeled preparation when she entered my kitchen. She knew immediately that Miriam had used the stronger mixture. That was why she could not look at me. Not because she doubted what I said, because she knew I was telling the truth. Understanding her fear did not erase what she had done, but it allowed me to stop asking whether I had somehow failed to explain my suffering clearly enough. I had explained it. She had understood. Her silence was her decision, not my deficiency. Leah remained part of my life until her death 12 years ago. She was the first person from our family to visit me openly after I left. She brought no speeches and no advice. She simply sat at my table and said she was sorry she had walked away that afternoon. I told her the adults had failed both of us. Daniel remarried. I heard that Miriam continued managing his household until she became too frail to do so. I do not know whether another bride was given her preparations. I hope not. I built a different life slowly. Not an easy life, not a perfect one, but a life in which questions were not treated as symptoms. When my children asked why a rule existed, I sometimes answered badly. Sometimes I grew impatient. Sometimes I heard my mother's fear coming through my own voice. Then I tried again. That is the difference choice made. I kept Miriam's black notebook in a wooden chest for more than 30 years. I thought about burning it, but I could never bring myself to do so. At first, it represented what they had done to me. Later, it represented what they could not successfully remove. Every page described a young woman resisting, while 4 respected adults insisted she was merely confused. I was weak. I was frightened. I could not cross a room without touching the furniture. But I was not confused. Last winter, my oldest granddaughter asked why I still kept an old notebook filled with another woman's handwriting. I opened it to the final remaining entry. Sarah continues to insist her thoughts are clear. My granddaughter read the sentence twice. Then she asked whether they were. I told her yes. My legs had failed me during my first week as a wife. The people I loved had failed me too. But even while I held the wall to remain upright, the part of me that knew the truth had never once sat down.